All right, everyone. Hello, my name is Maria Carr. I am an attorney here in Pittsburgh. This is the agenda on the screen. We're going to be talking about first the structure of the Pennsylvania court system, and then second, the election of judges in Pennsylvania. So the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania is actually the oldest Supreme Court in the whole country. It was created in 1722, and this is before even the United States Constitution. And the first Allegheny courthouse was actually in what is now Market Square. So why would anyone need to go to the court system? Well, in doing so, there are two avenues to pursue. You could take the civil route or you could take the criminal route. Now, the difference between a civil suit and a criminal case is very important here. A civil suit is basically every type of legal action except for a criminal case. This can cover personal injuries, it can cover contract disputes, adoptions, divorce, consumer good issues. And the party bringing that type of suit, a civil suit, is called the plaintiff. And the plaintiff must prove their case before either a judge or a jury. And basically their burden is to show that something is more likely than not. Now, the plaintiff and the defendant in this case, the person who is being sued, they are normally individuals or businesses or a combination of the two. And importantly, in a civil suit, there is no right to an attorney. Now, the second avenue is for criminal cases. And in a criminal case, it is between the prosecutor, or in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania brings this case against a criminal defendant or the person who committed a crime. And the prosecutor's job is to determine whether the defendant has actually broken a law, and they have to put on their case and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And a criminal defendant, it does have a right to have an attorney, and this is unlike in a civil case. Okay, moving right along. So this is the structure of the Pennsylvania state court system. Now, at the bottom here, you will see that we have the magisterial district courts. And we'll talk more about these levels in greater detail during this presentation, but this is an entry level. This is where cases can be filed initially, where people can sue for their rights initially. Then you go up a level and you have the Court of Common Pleas. And this is also an entry level court, where people can bring causes of actions. The next two, the Superior Court and the Commonwealth, these are called courts of appeals. And here you can take decisions from the Common Pleas Court and you can appeal them up to either the Commonwealth Court or the Superior Court if you have an unfavorable decision in a lower court. And then lastly, the court of last resort, as we call it, is the Supreme Court, and that is also an appeals court. All right, so at the bottom, again, we have the magisterial district courts with magisterial district judges, or MDJs, as I will probably refer to them. And as you might hear, if you're involved in the court system in any capacity. In Allegheny County, we are in the 5th Judicial District, and I believe there are 60 or 70 magisterial district courts in all of Pennsylvania. And right here, you can see just a picture of where our MDJs sit in Pittsburgh. All right, so what kind of case would you bring in a magisterial district court? Well, this is primarily for actions that are less than $12,000. Some of the types of cases that can be addressed there are summary, minor offenses, traffic violations, landlord-tenant disputes. The MDJs there, they can issue arrest warrants, they set bail, And notably, this, the MDJ, the Magisterial District Court, is not a court of record. In other words, once you get to the higher up courts, you have a court reporter that is basically transcribing the proceedings. That does not happen at the Magisterial District Court level. And if you would like the proceedings recorded, you would need to request that ahead of time. And important point, this is often called the People's Court because this is usually people's first interaction with the court system. All right, so the next level up after the magisterial district courts, we have the Court of Common Pleas. And here they hear appeals from the magisterial district court levels, or you can bring a case, a plaintiff can bring a case in the magisterial in the Court of Common Pleas that are over that threshold of $12,000. These are general trial courts in Pennsylvania, and they are responsible for adjudicating civil matters, criminal matters. In this year, 2023, it's an election year, a judicial election year, and there is actually one vacancy in the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas. So the court systems in Allegheny County and, in Pennsylvania in general, they do offer accommodations for people who can't speak English very well or are hard of hearing or other disability accommodations. And those resources can be found online. You can get information calling the court, but it is really important to notify the court system of those limitations as early as possible. All right, so we are still talking about the Court of Common Pleas. And at this level in Allegheny County and in Philadelphia County, but we're going to talk about Allegheny County tonight, there are 4 different divisions in the Court of Common Pleas. And the first is a civil division, and the administrative judge there is Judge Christine Ward. The criminal division, the administrative judge there is Judge Rangos. The family division, administrative judge there, Judge Eaton, and orphans court. And the administrative judge there is Judge O'Toole. And all of these different divisions, they all have separate departments as well. And we'll discuss those departments in the forthcoming slides. But Allegheny County is different from some other outlying counties because the judges in Allegheny County do specialize. They can specialize in civil, they can specialize in family law, they can specialize in the criminal division, and that's different in a lot of respects from another county, an outlying county, where their judges there, they address all of these issues. So in the civil division, you can see there are a lot of different departments. I'm not going to go over all of them, but some of them are complex litigation. This is where the more complex cases are heard. There is a discovery motions court. That is where, once you get into the case and you're battling out the evidence, finding evidence, collecting evidence, and you have an issue with the other side about, what they want to turn over, what you want to turn over, this is where you would go. You would go to the discovery motions judge with your issue, and he or she would address that there. There are general motions. There is housing court where they will assist litigants involved in landlord-tenant disputes. And there's these other departments as well that we don't have time to get into tonight, but they're very important. All right, and then in the criminal division, they have these different departments: adult probation, court-appointed attorneys, case status conference procedures, pretrial services, problem-solving courts, and summary appeals. Now, admittedly, I practice civil law, not criminal law, so this is not my strong suit, and I'm not going to try to explain like I know what's going on in the criminal division. But one very interesting thing about Pennsylvania and Allegheny County, they have these special problem-solving courts, and they address nonviolent crimes, some specific nonviolent crimes. And these crimes are typically associated with social problems, such as driving under the influence, drugs. They address things such as mental health and, certain nonviolent crimes committed by veterans. And in these problem-solving courts, the goal is to supervise the treatment and the rehabilitation of these defendants who are willing to change their behavior. And this is in lieu of a jail sentence. They are given a chance to rehabilitate themselves. Okay, departments of the family division. So there are several sections here: the juvenile section, the adult section. Adult section is where, you see divorces, child custody disputes, and also protections from abuse. Protection from abuse. In this department, a victim of abuse from a family member or an intimate partner can seek protection from the court. And the court can address this through a court order that prohibits the abuse, prohibits contact prohibits the abuser from contacting the victim, or requires the abuser to relinquish his or her firearms, and things to that nature. And lastly, in the civil, or not the civil division, in the Court of Common Pleas, we have Orphans Court. And Orphans Court basically deals with estates, trusts, wills, guardians, minors and incapacitated people, powers of attorney, adoptions, and things of that nature. Okay, so we went over the magisterial district courts. Then we had the Court of Common Pleas. Now we have the intermediate appellate courts. So there are two intermediate appellate courts in Pennsylvania, one being the Superior Court, and the Superior Court hears civil and criminal appeals from the Court of Common Pleas. It is the appeals court for most citizens and businesses in the Commonwealth. And then the other intermediate appellate court is the Commonwealth Court. And that hears cases involving state or local government. And this court is, it's unique to Pennsylvania. And I think that Pennsylvania is actually the only state in the country with a Commonwealth Court. So we'll talk about those intermediate courts in a little greater detail. So the Commonwealth Court, as I said, it's unique to Pennsylvania. There are 9 judges on the Commonwealth Court. And like I said, they are responsible for matters involving state and local agencies and other regulatory agencies in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They hear appeals, but on rare occasions, they can actually sit as a trial court, kind of like the Court of Common Pleas or the magisterial district courts, and not as an appeal court, but they'll sit as a trial court and hear specific cases brought by or against the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. An example of this could be a constitutional challenge or a tax dispute. And the cases heard in the Commonwealth Court, they're typically heard by panels of 3 judges. However, a case may be heard by a single judge or even a panel of en banc judges, where there are 7 judges actually listening to the case. All right, the other intermediate appellate court in Pennsylvania is the Superior Court. And the Superior Court is composed of 15 judges, and it is one of the busiest intermediate courts in the whole country. And this is because, you know, the Commonwealth Court only hears cases having to do with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but the Superior Court hears every other appeal. There is a right of appeal in every case. So the Superior Court has to hear every single appeal that comes its way. It's responsible for appeals in criminal and most civil cases that come from the Court of Common Pleas, and it's responsible for hearing matters involving children and families. Appeals, not matters. Like the Commonwealth Court, you know, cases in the Superior Court are typically heard by a panel of 3 judges, but it can also be heard by an en banc panel with 9 judges. And because the Superior Court has to take every appeal, the next level up is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court does not have to take every appeal, but because the Superior Court does, they are often the final arbiter of legal disputes in Pennsylvania. Whatever the Superior Court decides, if the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania decides it doesn't want to take another appeal, the Superior Court's decision is final. Therefore, this court's decisions have a very significant impact on Pennsylvania, the quality of life, education, and the economy. All right. And lastly, at the top of the pyramid, we have the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, or the court of last resort in Pennsylvania. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is the ultimate authority in Pennsylvania. What they say is the law in Pennsylvania. As I just explained, their review is discretionary, meaning they don't have to take appeals from the Superior Court. They don't have to take appeals from the Commonwealth Court. However, it is mandatory for limited categories, you know, interpretation of the Constitution or death penalties. They also have a very unique King's bench power, and this is a power of extraordinary jurisdiction. Basically, what this means is that the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania can consider matters when it sees the need to address an issue of an immediate public importance. This means, you know, that a case doesn't have to travel from the Magisterial District Court, the Court of Common Pleas, the Superior, the Commonwealth Court, up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, under this King's bench power, if it's that important, the Supreme Court can just take it and run with it. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court has 7 justices, typically. Right now, there is 1 vacancy, and the public will be voting on a 7th justice in November, so make sure you pay attention to what's going on there. And as I, you know, suggested at the beginning, this is the oldest court in the whole country. Okay, so this is the Supreme Court currently with the 6 justices, and the President Judge Deborah Todd. She is the first female Chief Justice sitting on the Supreme Court, which is great for the women. And yes, we will be electing a 7th justice here in November. Aside from its judicial decision-making function, the Supreme Court also takes on a number of administrative activities in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. You know, this includes presiding over judicial conduct. This includes, you know, admission to the bar exam or attorney discipline. There's also special committees for the Supreme Court, such as, you know, rules committees. There's committees for the rules of civil procedure, the rules of evidence, the rules of judicial conduct. So they take on a lot of different functions aside from just being, decision makers for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So their function is, it's very important, and they have a lot of impact on the lives of Pennsylvanians. So this is a picture of the city county building. It is on Grant Street, and it is home to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, Pennsylvania Superior Court, and the Commonwealth Courts when those courts are hearing cases here in Pittsburgh. Now, those courts of appeals, they also hear cases in Harrisburg and Philadelphia. But when they're in Pittsburgh, this is where they are. Also, Court of Common Pleas, Allegheny County. Some of the civil cases are heard here as well. Okay, so transitioning away from the Pennsylvania court system, there is also a federal court system. And you saw the pyramid for the Pennsylvania court system structure. On your screen in front of you is a pyramid that is the federal system structure. Now, a federal court hears much more limited types of cases. They hear two types of cases. The first is a case involving federal law, and the second is a case where both the plaintiff and the defendant are from different states, and the amount in controversy, the worth of the case, in other words, is greater than $75,000. So at the bottom tier, your trial level, where we have our Court of Common Pleas and our magisterial district courts in Pennsylvania, is the U.S. district courts. Then the Court of Appeals is the U.S. Court of Appeals. In Pennsylvania, that is the intermediate level is the Superior Court and the Commonwealth Court. And then at the top is the United States Supreme Court. The federal system and the state system, they're very different. In Pennsylvania, our judges, our justices, they're elected for terms, and then they are subject to retention elections. Whereas in federal court, the judges and justices they're not elected, they're appointed, and they are appointed for life. Okay, so we are still in the federal system here, and this is showing how Pennsylvania is divided up into different district courts. So again, that is the trial level. There's the Western District of Pennsylvania, the Middle District of Pennsylvania, and then the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is part of the Third Circuit, and the Third Circuit, the Circuit Courts of Appeals, those are obviously the appeals courts to where the district courts, plaintiffs, defendants can appeal their cases to. And the Third Circuit is comprised of Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Right. This is a picture of the federal courthouse on Grant Street here in downtown Pittsburgh. This is the home to the district court for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Okay, so we touched on this briefly already, that federal judges, they are appointed for life. This is a process called merit selection, as opposed to in Pennsylvania, we have elections. The public votes on who their judges are going to be, and there's no age limit when you're a federal judge. In Pennsylvania, there's an age limit at 75. 75 years old, you're done, except in certain situations where you can become a senior judge. All right, questions and answers. I don't know if we're holding those till the end.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna hold those to the end and go to our next section. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the election of judges in Pennsylvania. And This occurs in odd numbered years. So 2023, it's an election year for judges in Pennsylvania. So this pyramid, back to this pyramid, there's no municipal court in Allegheny County, but at the bottom, magisterial district courts, the judges there, they are elected for 6-year terms. And they do not have, they don't have retention elections after that. They are elected every term. Go up to the Court of Common Pleas, the intermediate appellate courts, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Those judges are elected for 10-year terms. And then after that, they are subject to a retention vote. So after 10 years on the ballot, you will see whatever judge, yes, no, do you want to retain them? And you pick yes or no based on their service. There are, it looks, I think, 2 retention elections in the Superior Court this year. There are 5 retention elections in the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas this year. And as to new judges and justices, coming this November, as I've already stated, we are going to be voting for a new Supreme Court justice, 2 Superior Court judges, and 1 Commonwealth Court judge, and a Court of Common Pleas for Allegheny County judge. So it's important that you pay attention to who you want to vote for, to make a educated vote. So who can become a judge or a justice? Well, you have to pass the bar exam in Pennsylvania if you want to be a judge or a justice. And you also need to be a district resident for 1 year prior to the election. Now, judges in Pennsylvania, they run in partisan elections. And what this means is, they will run with a party, Republican, Democrat. Once they're up for a retention election, they don't have any party associated with their name on the ballot. Now, because the requirement is that you have to pass the bar exam for Pennsylvania. You have to be a member of the bar. Well, they don't want people fresh out of law school being a judge. So basically, the bar associations, they review candidates, and typically, they want people to have minimum 10 years of experience. There are also judicial and bar association review committees that weigh heavily in on qualifications. They look at a candidate's experience, reputation, service to the community, and it's a very thorough process. And these associations, these groups, they make recommendations, which are very important. People follow closely. We also talked about how in Pennsylvania, the age limit is 75 years old, and then you may go senior. And again, this is in contrast to federal judges who are appointed for life. Now, for magisterial district judges, it's a little different. They do not have to be attorneys, but they do have to have training and pass an exam. And they also have to be 21 years of age. Unlike judges in the Court of Common Pleas and higher, MDJs can work on the side. It doesn't, being an MDJ does not have to be their full-time employment. And this is in contrast to, again, those judges further up the pyramid. Okay, we have talked about the retention elections. Again, a candidate will initially run as a member of a political party, but then retention is a non-political method of re-electing Pennsylvania judges, and it's intended to be politically neutral. we covered everything there. Okay. So now we are going to discuss a bit the laws and rules governing judicial candidates and judges. So judicial candidates and judges, they are subject to very strict standards of conduct. And this is for good reason. You know, the public wants to see that their judges independent, impartial. They're not being swayed by their family, by political motivations, by, you know, anything of that nature. So they are governed by the Pennsylvania Constitution and specific ethic rules, including the Code of Judicial Conduct. There is a rules governing standards of conduct for MDJs, for magisterial district judges. And under the Constitution and the rules, you know, the judges are expected to act in a manner that fosters public confidence in the integrity and the independence of the judiciary. You know, these rules cover a wide range of areas. You know, judges and candidates are supposed to carry out their duties impartially and diligently. They are supposed to refrain from inappropriate political activity and avoid conflicts of interest. Now, the Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 5, sets forth the activities that judges are not to do while they are members of the judiciary. And in addition to the Pennsylvania Constitution, they are governed by certain rules or canons. First and foremost, as I kind of mentioned earlier, judges, common pleas courts, judges and higher, they are to devote full time to their job as justices or judges. Additionally, you know, in that same vein, they are not to engage in the practice of law while they are a judge or a justice. They cannot hold office in a political party or a political organization. They also cannot hold office or a position in a for-profit government corporation or agency. They are expected not to engage in activity prohibited by law, kind of obvious, and they are not to violate any canons of legal or judicial ethics. And a very big thing for judges and judicial candidates is money. You know, money can corrupt, so they are not to accept payment for the performance of any judicial duty. Now, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, they have the final authority on issues involving ethics. So that's another one of their functions. Okay, so canon number 2 of the Judicial Code of Conduct. A judge shall perform the duties of judicial office impartially, competently, and diligently. So, you know, what does this mean? Well, this canon, it distinguishes judicial candidacy from political candidacy. Judicial candidacy is supposed to be unbiased and independent, whereas when politics are involved, things get a little bit more muddled, as we all know. This rule 2.4, which is one of the rules under canon 2, under the canons, there are multiple rules, but this governs a judge's duties. And 2.4 specifically addresses the external influences on judicial conduct. And basically, without reading this whole thing to you, it states that a judge should not be swayed by public clamor, fear of criticism, biases such as, you know, family, social, and political biases. And judges cannot defend themselves from criticism. They have to maintain the position that, you know, if they if they issue an opinion that is controversial, that receives criticism, they have to take the position that it speaks for themselves. The opinion speaks for itself. All right, another rule under canon number 2, 2.10 involves judicial statements on pending and impending cases. Now, this is an important rule regarding, impartiality and an independent judiciary. So what this basically says is that a judge cannot state his position on an issue that may come to the court. So whether that be controversial topics such as, abortion or access to birth control, education, the death penalty, things of that nature, a judge cannot go out and state, his position, his or her position on that in case it comes back to the court. Because, that would sway the public to think the judge might not be making a fair and impartial decision because he or she had these preconceived biases based on this matter. And this rule ensures that the integrity of the system is ensured, and also allows for judges to make unbiased opinions. Now, all states do not have this rule. And it's important here, again, for the reasons I just discussed, but mostly so that we have unbiased decisions coming out of our court system. All right, now we are moving right along to canon number 4. So canon number 4 says a judge or a candidate for judicial office shall not engage in political or campaign activity that is inconsistent with the independence, integrity, or impartiality of the judiciary. So canon number 4 is specific to candidates, not just judges, to candidates for judicial election. Basically, the rules under canon number 4 discuss a lot of different things, but they address politics. They can't hold office in a political organization. They can't make speeches on behalf of political organizations. They can't publicly or endorse or oppose a candidate for any type of public office. This rule also addresses money, how it is raised, how it is accounted for, and basically the candidate in an individual capacity cannot solicit or accept money. Now, candidates can have campaign finance committees that, can raise and solicit money for the candidate, but as an individual, the candidate cannot accept money. This rule 4.1 goes on, talks a lot about, monies, can't solicit it. They also, a candidate can't use its own court staff, facilities, or other court resources in campaign for a judicial office. So if a judge is up for a retention election, the judge cannot use his chambers, his staff, any of the court resources to do any type of campaigning. I think we hit all of these other points, but okay, continuing right along to 4.1. Now, a candidate needs to take appropriate action to ensure that the people working under him, whether, that's on his campaign or anything, they cannot violate these rules either. He must ensure that they don't engage in these prohibited activities that, we just went over in greater detail. Now, participation in political activity. So this is a comment to the previous rule 4, Again, this really just discusses what we have already went over in this presentation, that how important the public confidence is in the independence and impartiality of the judiciary, and that the perception of this all is very, very important, because of how, you know, this can influence what the public thinks of judges. Moving along to 4.2. So this is what a judicial candidate must do. They must, again, this theme here, they must act with independence, integrity, and impartiality. They must comply with the laws, specifically with election laws, election campaign laws, election campaign funding. They have to review all the content, that the campaign content that goes out before it is distributed to the public. They have to review it all. Now, this is the same rule. There is a lot of text on this page, but this is what the candidate may do unless prohibited by law. Again, they can establish a campaign committee to collect funds, because they can't collect money in an individual capacity. They can speak through any medium, on advertisements, you know, websites, other campaign type things. They can speak and oppose other candidates, but only for the same judicial office as the office that they are running for. Okay, this is more what a candidate shall not do. They can't use their money for private benefit. I think everyone knows that. They can't use the court facilities for their campaign, except that, you know, they can use the court for photos or videos to the extent that it's available to other candidates on an equal basis. Again, at the bottom here, very important, number 4, they cannot make any statement that will be expected to affect the outcome or impair the fairness of a matter pending or impending in any court. Again, they can't state their opinion, their position on something that the court might address down the line. Okay, so this is a comment to basically what we just went over. It basically just states, you know, they have to be fair and accurate in all statements, and pretty much everything we just went over. Okay, now there are some instances in which a judge is appointed in Pennsylvania. And so these are the rules addressing what a candidate who's going to be appointed may do. And in this situation, the appointment only lasts until the next election year, but this canon is specific to the appointment made by the governor for statewide judicial vacancies. All right, and this last one under 4.4 addresses campaign committees. So again, a judicial candidate can establish a campaign committee to manage its funds, to solicit funds, but you know, this has to comply with the law. A judicial candidate does not have to establish this type of campaign committee, but they are permitted to, rather. You know, sometimes candidates don't have campaign committees because they self-finance. They have their own sources of financial channels And they may want to do it this way so that no one can make the argument down the line that they were influenced by this group giving them money, by this person giving them money, and so on and so forth. And this mostly occurs only in local elections. Again, campaign limitations, same thing we've said. They can't prohibit, or they can't solicit contributions. And they have to, they have to tell their people they got to comply with the campaign finance and election laws when they are making, when they are receiving money on behalf of the candidate. All right, so what is important now that the election is coming up in November? How do you evaluate these judicial candidates? Well, there's a couple things that we should all consider when evaluating a candidate, including the legal experience of that candidate. It is a newer lawyer running for election, or is it a more experienced lawyer? What type of law did they practice? Did they practice primarily in the state system that we discussed? Did they practice more in the federal system that we discussed? Did they have a lot of courtroom experience? In addition, it's important to consider their reputation for integrity and fairness, the community involvement and public service. These, being a judge it's an act of public service. So, it's important to look into how have they served the public before? Would they be good for this role that is for public service? You can also consider their professional activities, their compassion, and their commitment to equal justice. Now, you can research the candidates on the internet on your own. There are a lot of resources out there that can tell you about the different candidates that are up for election this year. PMC is a great resource. They have some judicial recordings that you can watch, and the Allegheny County Bar Association, they have a review. They do a very extensive and intense review of the candidates. Also, the Pennsylvania Bar Association, they also do a review of the intermediate appellate level judges that we discussed. Oh, I went too quick, but again, here are the places where you can find out more about the candidates. Again, it is a very rigorous review process that these candidates are subjected to. So it's worth your while to dig into this a little bit and see who would be best, who's gonna help make the laws in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Again, getting a little bit ahead of myself, but vote in November. These judicial elections, they are important. It affects our lives, and we need good people on the bench. We need good people to support our citizenry and make the decisions that impact us on a daily level.